If you are someone who regularly engages with defenders of President Trump, you've probably heard Trump defenders say something along the lines of, Trump is not an authoritarian because he is shrinking the size of the federal government. They say, how can Trump be an authoritarian if he's shrinking the federal government? Authoritarianism is about big government, they say. Trump and Elon Musk with Doge are shrinking the federal government. So yeah, they think it's an open and shut case. This proves Trump is not an authoritarian. He's the opposite. He's a libertarian. Democrats want a stronger federal government, so therefore they're the real authoritarians. That's what they would have you believe. Well, you know what? Unfortunately for them, I'm putting out this video and I'm going to totally rebut that nonsensical lie, that horrific fallacy. So, small government, not authoritarian, right? No way. No, shrinking the size of the federal government. That can't be authoritarian, can it? Well, here's the thing. Power in the federal government is kind of a zero-sum game, actually. Sometimes decreasing the size of one branch of government's power results in an increase in power for another branch. We take from Paul and give to Polly, as they say. It's not always a zero-sum game, but the way that it's working with President Trump is. You might see where I'm going with this. So we have different branches of government. You know, we have the executive, that's the President of the United States, Mr. Trump himself. We have the legislative branch, you know, Senate, House. We have the judicial branch, which is every court in the country, basically, the federal courts, you know, the U.S. Supreme Court. And President Trump is working on shrinking the size of the government in order to increase the size of the executive branch of government. He's shrinking the other areas of government in order to increase his own power in comparison, saying, no, you don't get to have power over this, I do. So think about what Doge is doing. Elon Musk is cutting spending programs, cutting them at the federal level, and yeah, essentially stripping government of its power, stripping it of its power to regulate, destroying regulations. And the reason for this is simple. He wants President Trump in charge of that. He is doing the bidding of President Trump. He's doing that because he's part of the executive with Trump. So Trump assigned him to be his senior advisor, and so he's working with Trump and basically enhancing Trump's power, increasing Trump's power. So they say, oh, we're going to gut the administrative state. That's great. We're going to promote freedom. We're going to get the government, the administrative state off your back. Now, the way that they're doing that, of course, is a pretty stupid way, I think you could say. You know, government programs that actually help people and that don't harass people, that don't just restrict people's freedom, like the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. They're saying, no, you get handcuffed, loser. We're the ones in charge. This administrative agency, they have to go or they have to get severely cut. And they're violating the Constitution, too, by cutting these spending programs, which, you know, it's supposed to be Congress's power to cut spending. But they're coming in there and usurping this power and saying, no, actually, Congress, no, butt out. We get to do it. Elon Musk gets to do it because he supposedly knows better. He's a billionaire, right? Just like Trump's a billionaire. So they're increasing the power of the executive branch. They're decreasing the power of the legislative branch. They're putting a middle finger up to the power of the judicial branch, you know, saying, oh, we get to defy court orders. Sorry, 9-0 Supreme Court. That means nothing. We get to do what we want, you know. We're fighting for small government or something like that. But really, it's just unitary executive theory. It's just, oh, the executive, we just get to do what we want, you know. We're going to promote small government everywhere, except for the executive. The executive is the only part of government that matters, the only part that we don't want small. We want a very, very big executive. In Trump we trust, they say. And again, we can talk about how that's unwise strategically, because what if there's a Democratic president and we set the precedent for the executive branch being very, very powerful, and then a Democrat comes in and they're like, yeah, I'm going to usurp my power. I'm going to act the way Trump did, except from a left-wing perspective. So yeah, he is doing a very authoritarian set of moves. Make no mistake about it. Just because he happens to be shrinking government in some aspects does not mean he's not being an authoritarian. He's promoting his own power. He's decreasing other people's power, other people in the government, saying, yeah, you don't get to have power, of course. And then gesturing at this to the American people and saying, look, I am cutting government. I am making you free. The bigger the government, the smaller the people. So the smaller the government, the bigger the people. I'm making government smaller. Isn't that good? But no, it's a rhetorical trick. It's a trick used to basically usurp more power and, you know, galvanize support around the American people, get them to say, oh, look, the executive branch is looking out for me. They're destroying these other branches of government, these other, you know, the administrative agencies. They must really care about me. They're fighting for small government. They must be good. And so that helps them get more legitimacy. You know, people support them. They go, oh yeah, these government cuts are great. I support them. And then they can say, oh, look, people support this. We have a mandate, which people don't actually support it. That's what's the hilarious thing is. Even a majority of Republicans now are starting to become skeptical of Elon Musk being in government. Polls are showing. They're like, wait, we didn't elect Elon Musk. I mean, he seems like a cool guy. He's smart and all. You know, he knows about science, but we didn't elect him. What's going on here? So it is kind of backfiring, but let's make no mistake about it. Right-wingers who do this trick, this sleight of hand where they say, he can't be an authoritarian. He's decreasing the size of government. That's cool. You know, that's not authoritarian at all. They ignore the enlargement of government power at the executive level. They ignore that Trump wants to have all this power to himself. They ignore this pattern, you know, where the U.S. Supreme Court gives him immunity. And, they like that. You know, he gets criminal immunity for any official act as president. You can't prosecute him for it. So they love these barriers they're putting in place for the executive. But they're like, yeah, no, screw the whole idea of process for the rest of the government. He can just shut them down. He can just cut spending willy-nilly, you know, ignore separation of powers, ignore all that stuff. So, yes, it is fair to call Trump an authoritarian, even if he's shrinking the size of government. I don't care. I don't care how much he shrunk the rest of the government. The fact of the matter is that he's still hogging more power for himself, and he's committed to that. He said on the campaign trail that he would be a dictator on day one. Now, you might say, oh, that's just tongue-in-cheek and stuff, but he's acknowledging, though, like, okay, one person doing this much stuff, it is dictatorial in some sense, you know. There's a kernel of truth even in jokes. So he's like, yeah, no, I would be the dictator. I would do all this big revolutionary stuff on day one. I would usurp my power. And yeah, just say like, you know, screw Congress, screw the judges, which is what he's been doing. I'm going to get to do whatever I want. You're going to suck it. I got elected president. I have a mandate. You know, that's one of the most authoritarian tactics they do is say, we have a mandate. You need to shut up and respect our mandate. And yeah, it's just all about the executive at the end of the day, all about trying to hog that power, soak it up like a sponge. That power is water. The water is in other locations, and they just soak it up. So yeah, look, the branches are supposed to be equal. And that's the way it was working prior to Trump, actually, prior to this second term of Trump. The Biden administration had its problems, but they respected the other branches of the government. I mean, they had so many corruption issues and constitutional issues, but all of it pales in comparison to the Trump administration. I mean, we have not seen anything like this, and many progressive commentators are starting to point this out, that they're like, wait, okay, I had so many criticisms of George W. Bush and the way he handled things, but at least he believed in a functioning country, and Trump doesn't even. He's like, no, everything should be dysfunctional except for the executive branch, except conveniently for me. I think I'm above the law. I don't care what you want from Congress, what you want from the judges. I know what's best. He said on the campaign trail in 2016, I alone can fix everything. Stop and think about that. Stop and think about that in light of everything that's happened these past few months. I alone can fix everything. Yeah, count on me, baby. Don't count on anyone else. Just count on me because I alone can fix everything. Count on me. You can count on me so you can give me the power, and you must give me the power. Take away the power from everyone else so that I have more in comparison. That is pure authoritarianism. So yeah, look, we can have authoritarian members of Congress or judges who act authoritarian. That's true. It's not just limited to the president. But the way this president is acting is more authoritarian than anyone in Congress or anyone on the judiciary. This president is the most authoritarian in history, I would argue, just in these first few months. He's put Joe Biden, George W. Bush, Ronald Reagan, Richard Nixon, Andrew Jackson, Woodrow Wilson, even arguably to shame, just by his ridiculous power grabs. That I, the executive branch, get to do what I want. Let's shrink the size of government, except for me, and increase my power. It's the most sleazy thing ever, the most sleazy rhetorical trick. And I implore you to bring this up as a response to far right-wingers who say, well, Trump's not authoritarian, he's shrinking the size of government. And lastly, I will say to Republicans and right-wingers who are admitting Trump is an authoritarian and are coming to terms with that, you know, people who might not support progressive policy, might not want to vote Democratic, but are admitting that Trump is an authoritarian, I give you an immense amount of credit. I do. I might not agree with you on some things, but I give you so much credit for saying, okay, look, this is insane. Not, just falling in line with him because he has an R after his name or because he's more conservative on some issues, and you might agree with him, but being like, no, this is not a normal president thing. This is authoritarian nonsense in a way that no other president has really behaved. So I give you credit if you're a Republican or a conservative, a right-winger who admits that Trump is an authoritarian in some sense. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Like, comment, or subscribe to this channel. Thank you so much for watching. This has been the More the Merrier, and I look forward to speaking to you in my next video.